Welcome back for another episode of Pratik Critique. Now, the first time we had it, it was really great because we had a lot of people submit their images for critique. And again, the purpose of this is for people who own the Retouching series or people who don't can also follow along and see the feedback that I have from a personal perspective in order to make sure that you're evolving your craft and getting better at your retouching. And I think the best way to do it is by critiquing people's images that are trying to get feedback and seeing exactly how they can improve. Now, this episode specifically is going to be a continuation of the first one since I didn't get to finish all the images that I wanted to, and I just thought based on the feedback that I would actually post this. So thanks for tuning in again, and let's just jump into it and take a look at more images that we're going to be critiquing. And again, if you are new to this platform, please subscribe, and I'll be posting all the relative links in the description below on where to get the Retouching series, as well as possible options for future submissions, which I will be doing in my Photoshop group or in the Sue Bryce Education platform. Let's take a look at our first image of today, provided to us by Ildiko Grant. I hope I said your name correctly. If I did, I'm so sorry. Okay, so what I like about this image is the fact that the retouching is done really well. I love the way the skin was preserved. I love the way, you have a lot of ambience happening in the image. There's a couple of big problems that I see though. Number one is going to be the texture. Now I know the texture is a plus. However, I do notice that typically when you have texture in the background and the foreground, they all shouldn't be equally sharp and visible, because what that does is the focal point of the image is the eyes, and you expect that to be in focus. And anything that separates your eyes from the foreground and the background should or shouldn't be really in focus, or as much in focus, depending on your f-stop. So if you're shooting at like f11 or something like that, and you're quite zoomed out, you might see things a little bit more in focus over here, as well as the background. But I don't expect the foreground and the background to be just as in focus as each other. So I would consider possibly reducing the sharpness of the background by blurring it a little bit. You can go to Filter, Blur, and Lens Blur as an option on a new layer so that you can also fix that and just see how it looks blended in. It might give a little more depth to it, personal preference, as well as the foreground as well, a little bit. The next thing is going to be the actual redness over here. I see that there's like redness happening along the edges of the hand. I would fix that. There's also some issues over here with the top of the head. It looks like there was some texture that got painted in the hair itself. So I would either, erase that with a mask or just take a color like from the hair itself and brush it on top where you see the color being splattered. And there's a couple of easy ways to do that. Number one is going to be just adding a color fix layer here, sampling the color here, and with a low flow, just brushing it in. Just like that, you're able to see that color disappear. Now keep in mind that these actions and techniques today are all illustrated in the Retouching series, which I will link in the description, so that way we don't spend a ton of time going over every single step and procedure on how to do something. We can get into critiques. And this is great because then once you pick it up and check it out and you have any critiques that you want of yourself, you can be featured here in future episodes. All right, Ildiko, thank you so much for submitting the image. Otherwise, I think it's great. I love it. It's beautiful. I think, there might be a little bit other things like saturation issues where the hand is a little bit more saturated than say the top of the arm. You could use the Oversaturation Mask and mask it into specific areas to even that out. So as you can see here, this action is really powerful. And as I turn that on and off, you can see the hand match the saturation of the rest of the arm. And the mask itself is really detailed and does it all for you automatically. All right, let's go to our next one. This is by Ingrid Van Der Sel, who is a really wonderful photographer. For those of you who don't know, I like this image except for a couple of things, and I'll tell you what they are, which obviously you would expect me to do so. First thing is going to be the dress. There's a highlight that's sweeping down at the dress, and it's catching my attention immediately, even over everything else. The second thing is going to be the hair. I noticed that the hair over here has a different color than the top of the hair here. And what might be happening is based on something like using a different blend mode, or if you're dodging and using it set to overlay or something like that, you end up having coppery tones being brought out in the rest of the hair. If you want to add coppery tones to the remaining of the hair, you can add more saturation on top. You can set a blank layer set to overlay, and then perhaps even just sample that color and brush it in, and you can see those little tones being continued on to the rest of the hair. So those are a couple of solutions here that I would consider, and like that, you're able to match that bronze tone. And I suspect there might have been some overlay action happening here, which is okay, but just be careful. The next thing over here is going to be this bit here. It goes from like yellow to this darker color. So first and foremost, I would use an oversaturation mask. Let me go ahead and add a mask here. I'm going to invert that. I'm going to reduce the saturation here, like so. Next is I'm going to use a black and white adjustment layer, or a black and white helper layer. Let me take that out of the group. Then I'm going to use my dodge and burn. So I'll use my burn. Set the flow to 1%. And I'm simply going to go ahead and burn that down so it matches, right? I'll also take my dodge and then dodge that down. As mentioned, these actions are included in the retouching series as well, so you don't have to memorize anything again with your workflow. Right, so now that I have those two things done, you can see that the difference between the two is actually a lot more similar. If there's any more work that needs to be done, I'll just go ahead and continue working. Once I have that kind of close enough, I'm going to take a blank layer set to my color fix. I'll sample, let's say a neutral tone here, 10% flow. I'll even that out a little bit more. Let's sample maybe luck on the hand here, so we have a normal tone to sample from. In the shadows, I'll sample a darker tone. And let's all group this together. I'm sampling by holding Shift, selecting the first layer, going down to layer 1, then Command G. And now I have an area which is a lot more uniform, right? Considering where we were, and as well as the hair. So I'll do the same thing. I'm not going to edit any of this out. This is hilarious for me when I make little mistakes like this. I would tone down the dress area so it's a little bit more uniform. But aside from that, I love the feel that you're going with. I wouldn't change much unless you really need to. The forehead itself seems to have a little bit less texture than I would like. Maybe it's just because it's web res. All right, thank you so much, Ingrid. Let's go to Camille, who has this shot of a jewelry campaign. I've seen this done a lot for jewelry campaigns. Personal preference with selective color. But what I do want to mention is, let's say on the face, I would actually minimize the texture transitions over here. You can see how the retouching is actually done really well. When you zoom out here, transitions are beautiful. You know, you've left nice natural lines. I love it a lot. I would actually tone down the texture amount of the cheek here. And you can see a lot of the pores, which is normally not a bad thing. You could heal out a few of these pores here. But what I would do, aside from that, is I would use the clone brush technique in the series to take a clone brush set to a low flow in and use those techniques to even out those harsh texture areas so that you're able to get an area which is a lot more uniform with the rest of the face. I would also consider this flyaway here and this flyaway and that flyaway. That's not a fly, that's like a little bump or something. This flyaway here, flyaway going into the background, and also reducing the neck. I would liquefy the neck a little bit more because it looks a little large from this perspective, and the tension itself is creating much more tension than I would like. So I would liquefy it going this way, so that way you can see everything and the tension goes back on the necklace. I would also consider filling in this gap here and that gap there using a clone brush, and that should also help you. Let's just do a really quick like that. See, 10% flow, just filling in really quickly does a nice job. And again, the flyaways too. Use a spot healing brush really quickly, just a couple of those flyaways with content to wear. Okay, great. So again, as I mentioned, this is all in the retouching series, so I'm not going to elaborate too much. But thank you so much, Camille. And speaking of backgrounds, well, I didn't speak of backgrounds, but now speaking of backgrounds, I would also fix the background. So over here, the background is a little bit splotchy. You can easily clean that up. And I have a little module just on that in the series. So check it out. I think it'll help you clean that up quite quickly. Next image we have here is going to be Chris Konopa. Now, Chris, I think this image is well intentioned because you spent a lot of time on this. I like that a lot. However, when you zoom out here, it looks really blurry, which is unfortunate because when you zoom in here, you can see all the textures there. And the effect that I like to call this is kind of like an orange peel effect, because with the orange peel effect, the orange itself has very similar tones when you zoom in. It's all very similar and harmonious or homogeneous. However, the texture itself is unique and different and intense and unique based on the area that you're looking on. So there's a separation happening between the texture and the color. And that's a dead giveaway for images that seem to be retouched too much. Again, this is personal preference, but I would try and recommend maybe not using, or I would say not making the skin tone colors so perfect, because what it does is it creates a separation between texture and color and it makes it look filtered. So personally, I would tone that down a little bit more just to see how it looks when you bring the original colors back. And I think the effect is going to be very similar to this area of the neck where you see the colors are separated from the texture. And I think it looks a lot better in that instance where you see more micro contrast with the colors. And I like that a lot when you see retouch images done that way. The other thing is the contouring. You notice that the features themselves are really, really soft. And what it's creating is it's creating tones that look too similar across the entire face, where the forehead matches the under eyes, what matches the tip of the nose. The dimensions are really, really soft. So I would pull that back a little bit more. So again, based on if this is your style, obviously I'm not going to tell you to change your style. But in the context of not knowing what you do and what you prefer doing, that would be an interesting thing to try out. Aside from that, I would actually consider filling in the gaps of the hair by using a clone brush. And again, I have a module and tutorial specifically based on the clone brush and filling in hair. So that's something I would fix here, because beauty shots, they all have areas like that that need to be fixed and they require it to be so. But aside from that, I have no other complaints. I love the fact that the makeup here is really beautiful. You can see a rich green tone contrasting with some copper elements. That's really nice. Well done there. Thank you so much, Chris, for sending in your image. The next image we have here is from Raja Allison. And Raja, I actually really like the tones of this image. It has a nice warm feel, a reminiscent feel of kind of old painterly look, which is nice. Have the nice textures here along the scarf. But again, I'm seeing the same thing as the previous image where the tones zoomed out look really, really smooth. But then when you zoom in, there's a lot of texture that don't match up with the tones. And so it's giving me the separation of, is it supposed to be soft or is it supposed to be in focus? And it's giving me the look of an out of focus image with an in focus texture profile. So you want to make sure that it's not overly smooth with the colors, because everybody's looking at it from this distance and it could create a very strange look. So again, if you're happy with that, that's okay as well. But I can tell that there was a lot more smoothing happening, and I would tone down that smoothing because you're blending a lot of the colors together and it changes anatomy as well. But overall, I'll be honest with you, it's not bad at all. I don't mind it too much, but I would fix that and see if it looks better that way. But I do like the fact that it's not overly done in that respect. You can still see where the shadow is on her arm, where it should be, where the shadow is on her back, where it should be, and those different elements. Okay, the same thing goes for the face. There's too much texture happening. It's causing a lot of blemishes to pop up that need not to be that sharp, but the colors look really smooth, so it's creating separation. But aside from that, I like the colors, I like the photo, I like the textures, and I hope that helped. Thank you so much, Raja. Next thing is going to be Our next image is going to be Shannon. Now, Shannon, this is actually a beautiful image, but there's one thing that I'm having a problem with. First thing is going to be, there's clearly a lot of texture that you captured because the dress itself here is popping out with a lot of color and detail. However, the face itself looks very, very blurry. I don't know why this is. It could be a filter, it could be frequency separation, or it could be it's not in focus, but the eyes are in focus. So it's making me believe that there was some over retouching happening. So I'd pull it back, keep a lot of her natural skin texture, and then also focus on these little spots here. But aside from that, I like the photo a lot. Fixing that would help dramatically. And also the highlight. I would actually fix the highlight and bring it back down because it's a little bit too bright. So bringing down that highlight would help a lot. Again, I have a special tutorial on fixing hotspots, which you can do in many ways. But in this instance, I'll tone down the hotspot. It looks really bright. It's taking attention away from the eyes themselves. Also, when actually taking a photograph of this next time, if you have a chance to do something similar again, I would bring the light a little bit lower because there's not a lot of catch lights in her eyes, which makes the eyes look sunken in. And based on her bone structure, you can tell that her eyes are sunken in comparison to the ridge of the eyebrow. And what it's doing here is it's creating a lot more shadow in this area. So I would consider change the light position as well, so you get more light happening lower, so you're seeing more light in the eyes. So something to consider to play with and try out. Maybe this was the intention you're going for, but hey, you never know. It always helps to have other ideas. All right, thank you so much, Shannon. Next thing I have is Vuk Bortnik, and this is an amazing image. I like this a lot, and this is such a good example to everything else I was mentioning prior to. The colors are beautiful. You can see there's micro contrast in the colors. For example, when you zoom in here, you can see there's that dark color, then there's light colors, and dark colors and light colors. And that difference at that pixel level, when zoomed out, translates really well because it matches up with the sharp texture. When you see texture that's really sharp, you anticipate colors not being 100% perfect at pixel level, which honestly is fine. And it should be that way because now when you look at it from this perspective, it looks really clean and beautiful. It's a nice balance. Obviously, I don't know what the before looks like, so I can't tell what her anatomy is and structure, but maybe this was a little bit darker before, is brightened up. I don't know, but I like the treatment of it. It's beautiful to me. I would maybe consider healing out a little bit more though. For example, over here, there's some spots and dots happening across the face that maybe should be healed out. There's also going to be some dots on the face that I would fix up with the makeup being spattered across the face. And also some rough areas along the side of the nose. Everybody always asks me to clean up the dots that are happening on the side of the nose and on the nose themselves. So I would also push and continue that suggestion. Aside from that, I like it a lot. One thing I would also fix is over here, you notice that the color of the lipstick starts to fade away in comparison to the rest of the lip color. I would fill that in a little bit more and deepen that. But aside from that, I'm loving it. Well done, Vuk. And let's go to our next one. Our last one is Zita. And so Zita actually sent this image, and it's actually really beautiful. I like it a lot. I wouldn't change a lot about it because the context of the lighting, it's harder lighting, it's an older subject. You know, you have this really nice color tone. I like the colors of this image a lot. It's really playful, it's soft, it's fun. I would actually try and remove this area here if client doesn't mind. That's one consideration I have. A couple of hairs I would get rid of on the side of the arm. It's beautiful. I think ultimately I wouldn't change this too much because portraits like this, you don't need a lot of work. Maybe get rid of the sweat if it's something you're trying to get rid of. If it's shot outdoors and it wasn't intentional, because with sweat and water drops on the face and stuff, either you have a lot of it or you don't have like 1 drop or 2 drops. So I would consider removing those water drops or next time adding more just to make sure it's all even in consistency. The background's fun as well. I would maybe even align the backdrop a little bit more. And to do that is really simple. I'm going to actually sample part of this image here with the rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to Command J. I'm going to Command T. I'm going to right click and say warp. And then what I'll do here is I'll drag this corner down and do it that way. And maybe even adjust it a little bit this way and hit enter. You can see it's a lot more even. It's not perfect, but you get the idea, right? We've just stretched it out a little bit more so that it falls in line perfectly to match the other side. But aside from that, really liking this. Great job. All right, thank you so much everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pratik Critique. If you have any images you want to submit in the future, I'll be definitely posting links in my groups or the Sue Bryce Education group. So I'll put that all in the description for you to check out. And again, please subscribe. Make sure that you're tuned in because it really helps me and motivates me to produce more episodes for you, for people that do find this as a benefit. Again, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.